All right, welcome back to New Hampshire Today. As a perfect tee-up to our Jen and Jen segment, more proof, Jennifer Wells, that common sense is as precious as oil or gold or a scarce resource in New Hampshire these days, because we talked about no cupcakes in the Manchester school system, no dodgeball in Wyndham. Now a Conville Regional High School ruling says that Brendan Garabrandt, who has a lot to celebrate for the upcoming graduation, he's an 18-year-old who graduates from boot camp on Friday.
Good for him.
Paris Island, South Carolina. And he flies home to be with his high school for graduation. He wants to wear his dress blues from the United States Marine Corps that he's earned. The graduation versus the cap and gown. He feels that covering him up would be an insult to the uniform. I agree. What do you think?
I agree with that.
Let him wear his dress blues?
Yes, absolutely.
But the school says, oh, no, we can't have that at graduation.
That's just ridiculous.
Hi, Jennifer Coffey. How are you?
I'm mortified by what you just said.
I'm not making this stuff up.
But those very same people, I'm sure, are sitting out there on, 4th of July and waving, and we love our troops. And here's a young man who's just signed up, and they're going to deny him that?
I think they'd be proud. There's nothing, no offense.
You would.
Love the Army, Air Force, Navy, but our dress blues, my dad's still hanging, his uniform still hangs in my closet. The beautiful uniform. You think the school would be proud.
Yep.
So how was Atlanta and your big The Blade show?
Oh, my God, it was amazing. How do I describe this? You walk into a room that seemingly goes on forever, and there's over 10,000 people there, and hundreds of different vendors and amazing works of art. And and there's a cutting competition that's just phenomenal. I actually have a piece of rope that's probably a good 7 inches thick around that a person cut through in one slice. They're going to make it through this course. The fastest guy wins.
Wow.
And it was just an amazing experience.
10,000 people.
Over that.
That's a lot.
Wow.
Easily over that.
That's
easily.
a lot.
If you want to see highlights, actually, if you go to jencoffey.com, I've got a link right on my front page with just a few pictures, but I don't think I did it justice.
I'm there. I'm going to check it out. So today we have a great subject. We're going to talk more about this, Jennifer Wells. And
Yes.
Of course, Jennifer Coffey, Jen and Jen, our segment. I think one of the most unique segments in New England, if not the country, with these two. Talking everything from Second Amendment stuff to home protection, self-awareness, how the media handles a conservative woman versus a liberal woman, and sort of the bias. Jennifer, this is great. The only problem is you weren't out there with her, JW.
I wasn't, no.
I think she needs to come with me next year and experience
Do you think she can cut it?
I think she...
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Now, Jen, you were the guest speaker. What were some of the key points that you made in your presentation?
You know what? I was really honored. That was the third time that they had invited me to be their keynote speaker. And we really talked about a lot of different things. One of the things we talked about before we left a few weeks ago, we talked about the TSA and how they can't seem to make up their minds whether or not pocket knives are okay. Do you know that internationally, pocket knives are fine? You come to the U.S. and suddenly it's a shame to have one. And what's really funny is if you go into an American airport and order a steak, they give you this really huge, big fork and a plastic knife.
Really?
Yeah, but can I just because I'm going to be a little controversial here. I understand the rights that Americans had to give up after some scumbags on 9/11 decided to do what they did with airplanes loaded with gasoline as weapons, right? And box cutters to take over the planes. But we didn't do that. They did. And I just the knife thing, I'm not sure. I'm fine with one. I'm fine with a law-abiding person carrying anything. That's just me. But the whole knife thing, I'm not, I can see why there's been a controversy over getting rid of that policy.
Well, the problem with that is because you're looking at it as a weapon and not a tool. The people that carry knives are tools.
I have a Leatherman. I understand. I get that. But continue. I believe there was, and I'll paraphrase, a great person once said, he that gives up his liberty for the sake of safety deserves neither. Right. And if you're on a plane and some wacko is doing something and you got some good people sitting there, and not an air marshal nearby, right? And you have a tool or something, or a pen, and you know self-defense, and you know how to protect or take care of someone. I'm just saying, the whole knife thing, I'm sort of surprised they were going to relieve that. Isn't that now, they lifted that ban, didn't they?
They lifted it, and then they reinstated it, and now there are ongoing talks between the American Knife and Tool Institute, the TSA, and the International Civil Aviation Organization. And basically what it comes down to is teaching people the difference between tools and criminals. Somebody bent on doing harm is going to do so.
That's true of any weapon, right?
Right, and I totally believe in the education piece. I think it's all about education.
It's absolutely. I mean, I love you, Jack, but if I picked up that phone and hit you in the head with it the right way, it becomes a deadly weapon under the law. I
get it. I understand it. And or politically speaking, because, people are so intent on targeting, no pun intended, things that people who are nuts choose to use, right? In the last month or two, there've been a lot of incidents where bad people have used knives on college campuses for multiple attacks, but you didn't see Joe Biden convene a committee on that, did you?
How many people died in the last month in a car? Nobody's convening a convention on that.
Right.
I mean, if we really wanted to protect ourselves from everything that any criminal has ever used to hurt themselves, well, you know what, Jen? I guess we'd all have to be running around in bubbles.
I agree with that, I would think. But all of this is a good segue to my next question for you. Now, you worked on knife legislation during your time as a state rep. Tell me some of the things you were looking to do through that work.
Basically, what we realized was people like me who are EMTs and even police officers couldn't buy safer tools. The difference between the knives today is really the technology. The knife that I happened to want had a locking mechanism that locked it closed, and it had a locking mechanism that locked it open. That made it safer for me to use and safer for me to use when I was trying to cut somebody free. But it was illegal because it was a quote-unquote switchblade that have this negative connotation to it that really started back in the 1950s.
I remember that, actually, and it carried into the, I'd say, almost the 70s, didn't it? The whole switchblade fear of
somehow that's more dangerous than I'd love to see what you use to carve your Thanksgiving turkey.
Right. Now, Jen Coffey, let me ask you this question. What I used to call a buck knife, for hiking and being out in the woods, a good buck knife. I don't know how long the blade would be. I'd say maybe at least 6 inches. Are those legal, technically?
Yes. In New Hampshire, yes.
Can you order them from another state manufacturer to get like a nice, I'm talking about nice, like, wooden handle, buck knife, leather sheath?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, you
can. Because as a kid, I had like 2 or 3.
But don't go to Massachusetts.
Really?
Unfortunately, our listeners in Massachusetts, especially in Boston, Boston has a little-known city ordinance that says you can't have a pocket knife that has a blade length greater than 2.5 inches.
Really? Today?
Yes.
So you couldn't carry a Leatherman or just a tool like some people might have attached to their keychain in Boston?
I wouldn't suggest becoming a felon.
That's so
Our
crazy.
listeners in Boston should be aware of that. I can go to Plymouth, Mass., and be perfectly legal, drive to Boston to see a show, or maybe I'm a carpenter and I get a job call for Boston. I might be, if I'm carrying the wrong knife, and I don't know this because it's a city ordinance, it's not a state law.
Jen,
I'm a criminal.
Jennifer Coffey brings up the, like a holiday dinner, your kitchen.
Right.
And I know a lot of home experts, self-defense will talk about this. Who knows your kitchen better than you? No one, right?
Exactly.
Most people have a butcher block with all kinds of knives that they use for cooking, carving meats and all that. And some of these knives, talk about lethal potentially in the wrong hands, and yet that's okay in your life. But going out into the world, having a tool, and I keep bringing up the Leatherman, for example. Some people would say, "Oh, that becomes a weapon."
I don't know how many.
Where does the mindset?
Well, you know what? It's because it is this unusual and bizarre fear of an inanimate object that somehow it's going to jump off a table and hurt you, and it really doesn't make any sense.
You're way too logical.
I know that these fears developed long before I was born, back when everybody was talking about the Jets and the Sharks were going to have, mayhem in the street. We were going to see these massive fights in the streets. But, folks, no offense to any of our listeners, but the Jets and the Sharks, they're in their 80s now, and we need to get over it.
Build a bridge.
Jen and Jen, we're going to be back. News, traffic, weather, more of our segment. Jennifer Coffey coming from the Blade Show. Over 10,000 people attended it in Atlanta. She was a keynote speaker. You can all see look at some of the highlights here right here on her website, jencoffey.com, and that's COFFEY.com. We'll be right back. News Radio 610 96.7. Yeah, you do. Great subjects, great talk. Jen and Jen, welcome back. New Hampshire Today. Jack Heath, News Radio 610 96.7. Jen Coffey, jencoffey.com, COFFEY. still you can bring out the coffee. Jen Wells.
Yes, I'd like to welcome in a new sponsor on the Seacoast side, Renaissance Firearms. They're located in downtown Gonick at 19 Main Street. So
Cool.
if you all get a chance
Congrats.
out on the Seacoast, check them out.
All right.
That's awesome. We have a sponsor jumping in there. I'll be glad.
Oh, there'll be more. There'll be more.
yeah.
Trust me.
Oh yeah, I got a few folks in mind who've been talking about that they enjoy the show, and I hope that they're going to give the station a call and sign on.
Yes,
I
there
like
you
that.
have it. There you have it. Jennifer.
So we are talking about the Blade Show that you just recently came back from, Jen. And before we went to break, we were talking about some of the misconceptions about guns. Excuse me. Are there any laws or other misconceptions that people tend to have that we're not aware of that you often get asked about?
You know, there's always this really bizarre fear, and I don't know how to fix that. Especially when it comes to knives, it's an inanimate object. You know, it basically what it is teaching people to understand that they're tools, and that these tools come in handy for so many people. I mean, I've got 125 people listed on my website that use these tools every day to work or for a hobby.
Who doesn't use a knife during the day? Think about it.
And you don't think about it, and that's the thing, and that's the very
More than
thing.
you use a hammer or an electric drill or you name it, right?
Mm-hmm. And last time I checked, most people at Thanksgiving are using a knife to cut their bird up.
See, just some context here, because what happens, Jen and Jen, is you have this emotional, and Jennifer Wells, you put it well the other day when I was being way too logical on some of these debates, right?
Yes.
But let's just bring up one of the most horrific crimes in New Hampshire's history since I've been a part of the media landscape, watching and being close and actually covering murder trials, interviewing murder suspects, being there. The Mount Vernon case was a machete. Machetes.
Yes.
Okay. The Bedford home invasion, a screwdriver.
Yep.
The point of these attacks were the individuals that did it, not their choice of hurting, how they're going to hurt people. See what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. When I was doing my research for the bill in New Hampshire, I actually found 2 incidences that involved a Christmas tree stand. I'm not making this up, folks. In Florida, if you look it up, I'm sure you'll find it. There was a young man who was unfortunately had some kind of issues going on, and he literally almost killed his dad with a Christmas tree stand.
I'm not surprised.
Wow.
Well, I don't think we should put a law banning
But-
Christmas tree stands.
But we do. That's the point. We
over-legislate everything.
We just think that a law or a ruling. That's why I think discussing these other politically correct things, like no cupcakes in the Manchester schools, except for what these things matter, even though it's off topic. It's the feeling that if you pass a rule, it's 100% compliance with the sheep.
Right.
We've had Boy Scouts get in trouble because they had a knife in their car.
I know. It happened to a nephew of mine. Yep.
Eagle Scouts. These are kids that are the top of their class. And they're getting in trouble because of something they left in their car from their scouting field trip over the weekend.
Right.
When I first went to Blade Show in 2010, the show actually was illegal and nobody realized it because Atlanta, just like Boston, had these bizarre laws on the books.
Right.
And they actually had them illegal back then. Now, following the lead of the state of New Hampshire, they've joined 7 other states that have repealed their bans. There's been 13 pro-knife bills passed across the country, and there's been a ton of anti-knife legislation that have been killed, even in New York.
I have a buddy, Ned.
New Jersey.
Ned, who's a listener. If he's listening, good morning, Ned. He's like a younger brother of mine. We hike a lot. He's not a very good hiker, by the way, but since I've known him, he's carried a Leatherman or a knife on his belt, just like it's a part of his wallet, his comb. Well, I don't know if he has a comb because his hair is always messy. I'm teasing
He would
a
have
friend.
loved this show because not only did they have different kinds of knives, but they had a whole section of Living Expo that had all kinds of great gear that people from our neck of the woods, especially those that go hiking, would love to have because they've got these great, survival gear, the kind of thing you want to have if you get lost on the trail, that the Fish and Game are always talking about. People be prepared.
Thank you.
Right.
And by the way, I'm going to say this to anyone, but especially I'm going to say it to women because I've said it to my wife, Patty, who likes to go out in the, North Country in the woods and hike or cross-country ski in the winter. Just carry some... If you want to call it a tool, make sure you have something on your person. I had a buddy who's now in the Green Berets, speaking of the North Country, very proud of him, his former ski patrol buddy. And he'd say the people that go out in the White Mountains, especially women alone on a hike, you never know who you're going to bump into. You know how many criminals, I'm sorry to get exaggerated and scare people, you know how many people hide out in the White Mountain, the trails, just to get away, hide out? There's not 99% of great, loving, good people. But also animals. You never know what you're going to encounter when you're outdoors alone, right? the number of people that don't carry anything on them. Or if a weather storm comes in, you need to cut something quickly to get some cover, some pine, brush or something if there's a storm, or you're hurt and you got to cut, part of your clothing for a tourniquet. Isn't it nice to have some tools on you? And a lot of people, they don't even think of bringing that out.
Right.
Oh, I don't need that.
There was a young man in New Hampshire who was on a scouting trip, and right after we had passed the legislation, his dad had gotten him a new tool, and they were out in the boats, and another fellow scout had gotten tangled in some rope, was literally going to drown, and the scout saved his life with that tool. The emphasis of law should always be on the criminal act and not some kind of inanimate object. Even the New
Or
Hampshire,
on the person and not the tool.
Well, yeah, we've got tons of laws on that stuff.
Right,
Tons of
Yeah,
it.
but we don't enforce them.
Now, Jen, do you think there is a trend in knife purchases like guns when do sales tend to go up in hard economic times? And to that other point,
Good question.
Bringing back the aspect of, from a woman's perspective, are there a lot of women that attend these shows?
I was really actually shocked and surprised and happy to see that the number of women that I saw at this year's show had to at least have tripled. And I may be being conservative in my notation. There's a lot of women involved, and trending. You know what it is? It's trending on technology. Everybody always wants to have something that's better than what they had. When you have a cell phone and it's 2 years or whatever has gone by, you upgrade to the newer technology. Well, if I've got a pocket tool that I utilize and I see new tech that I think is great, then I upgrade to new technology, and that's what you see happening there. Actually, A.G. Russell
I was
is
just going to say, New Women's Catalog, right?
They're one of my favorite knife companies. They've been around since 1964. They're considered the authority. If you check out their website under their related sites, they just started a new catalog called the Women's Prerogative.
Cool.
And it's got some really gorgeous jewelry.
Really does.
I've already started a shopping list. If my husband's listening, the shopping list is located on your nightstand.
With little Sharpie check marks. I bet you there must have been some beautiful cutlery for cooking, like artwork type stuff with the handles or
amazing.
Wooden or type.
I could not
like
describe
like
them.
a lodge type feeling. Beautiful.
I couldn't describe good enough. I couldn't do them justice. I mean, if you go
How expensive are some of these like the cooking like works of art?
You know what? They can be pricey, but you know what? They're going to last you.
That's
They're
true.
going to last you a lifetime. I mean, if you
That's
buy
true.
something and it's warping right away, that's not lasting you. And that's kind of an interesting segue that you brought up that, because one of the issues that's facing the knife industry is the theft of their intellectual property and counterfeiting. And that's actually,
really?
Yeah, it's actually
Almost like you see with some of these other designer or specialty brands, the knockoffs?
It's worse than that, and I didn't realize it. I realized that there was an issue, but I didn't realize how bad it was until I actually talked to some of the designers and realized not only are they stealing the design, but they're going so far and brazen as to put their logos and their names on these knockoffs. People are buying them thinking they're getting, if the price is too good to be true, folks, it really is too good to be true.
Well, that's true. If someone comes up to you in New York City and said, here's a Rolex for $22, it's probably not. Great stuff, as always.
I think all people in New York City tell the truth. I don't.
Yeah, right. Including Mayor Bloomberg about Kelly Ayotte, right? I'm being facetious. What did Kelly say earlier? No big gulps for you.
Exactly.
My vote's not for sale.
So he's Mayor.
Yeah, I don't think she's buckling under your money. Recapping, this is the Blade show that Jennifer Coffey just went to. Over 10,000 people. She was a keynote speaker. That's going to drive some sales to your website, I imagine. For your, she does have a store. And I love the theme music now too, Jennifer Wells.
I think it's perfect.
We didn't have it in the library, so I just YouTubed it real quickly. So I'll have to put that in there.
Uh-oh.
So, Jen, before we close out the segment, can you tell me a little bit about Arms Collectors and how can people find out more? I know that is there a meeting tonight?
Actually, there is.
Okay.
They're called the Fort Constitution Arms Collectors. They meet at 7 p.m. in the Bow Community Center. Their website is armscollectors.org. They are a membership org, and they are an affiliate with Pro Gun New Hampshire. If you go to their website, you can get more information. And it's a great time. People just get together. They trade everything from camping gear, fishing gear, memorabilia, knives, all kinds of great stuff, and firearms-related things. It's just a really good opportunity for locals to get together from across the state, and just have a good time trading.
When's your? Do you have a class coming up in Manchester? A course? Did that happen?
That has not happened yet, and I believe that's been rescheduled now because there was a a little bit of an issue, but there are always courses running, and I suggest if you go to the NRA's website or you visit places like Wilson Hills Pistol Club or come on and drop me an email, there are consistent classes going on.
And by the way, since the left has tried to demonize the NRA, a lot of these courses that Jennifer Coffey's talking about, folks, if you just want to go find out for yourself and not believe the political garbledygook, a lot of these self-defense and self-awareness, like home protection stuff, they don't even talk about a gun. It's like the NRA has self-defense, whether you're out in a parking lot at a mall, just walking. It's not like, oh my goodness, they're just out there. They're not out there. Wait till something happens to you. God forbid. You'll like these courses. Thank you, Jennifer Coffey and Jennifer Wells.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, back in a few.